Welcome back to Fabulous Creations. I'm Ron, and later this month I'll be attending my first ever Woodworking and Makers Convention. I'll be going to WorkbenchCon 2020 down in Atlanta, Georgia. It's a 3-day event filled with learning, making, and networking, and I could not be more excited. I've been following John Malecki and Brad from Fix This Build That for a while now, and I first heard about the conference on their podcast where they talked about last year's WorkbenchCon. It sounded like the perfect opportunity to meet other makers, learn from some of my favorite YouTubers in a hands-on setting, and meet some brands that I might want to work with in the future. Now, I know I'm not a big YouTube star, but something I've always been told is you gotta fake it till you make it, right? Something a lot of these big names in our space have is a custom trucker hat with their logo on it to wear in their videos. Now, there are companies out there that specialize in making this kind of thing, but from some initial research, a lot of them tend to have minimum order requirements of 25 hats or so, which adds up quick and makes it quite expensive to do. So while I can't afford to have that many custom hats made, I can afford one blank hat and a couple pieces of leather that I can etch on the laser. So, I made my own. And I didn't just make one, I made two different styles, one light gray with a white leather patch, and one black with a suede leather patch. I love how both of them turned out, so let's take a look at how I did it. To start out, I would obviously need a hat, and I would need some leather. A lot of the better trucker hats you see these days are Richardson's brand. They make a ton of different styles of hats, and one of their more popular trucker variety hats is the Richardson 115, which is a low-profile trucker hat, meaning the dome isn't super deep, such that there's a ton of airspace above your head when wearing it. That sounded like the type of trucker hat that I liked, so I ordered two. One light gray in the front with black mesh in the back, and another black in the front with dark gray mesh in the back. Both in size medium-large because I have a big old noggin. I also needed some leather. Now, I've only briefly experimented with leather on the laser, but one of the things they drill into your heads when taking the initial laser training class at the Makerspace is that you can only cut and etch real animal hide leather on the laser. That is to say, no faux leather. The reason is because faux leather is often made from a type of PVC, which, when cut with the heat and energy of the laser, releases chlorine gas. That's not only bad for you, of course, but it's also highly corrosive to the laser internals. So, don't try it, even if you have really good ventilation. I found a small shop on Amazon that sold 12-inch by 12-inch pieces of real leather for a decent price, with their target market seeming to be folks who want to make custom crafts, jewelry, handbag, etc. with the leather without buying a whole roll from a tannery, which sounded perfect for my use. I was pretty happy with it when I got it. It looked like it was decently thick, uniform, with no blemishes or the like, and while I'm not a leather expert, this stuff seemed like the real deal. Before etching my logo, I had a little file prep to do on the logo. I learned long ago that designs with superfine details in the black portion of the design, that is, small areas that wouldn't be etched, surrounded by areas that would be etched, sometimes need to be beefed up when laser etching to compensate for the laser beam charring the area around them. This isn't nearly as necessary with small details that are on white, but it just depends on the usage. In this case, doing a test etch or two in the scrap area of my design revealed that the small letters on my logo got nearly lost and super thin if I didn't beef them up beforehand. To beef them up, I opened up the logo in Adobe Illustrator, selected the affected paths, and then performed an offset paths operation. This effectively expands the bounds of the selected path by whatever measurement you enter. I selected 0.05 inches, which is about 1.5 millimeters for my metric friends out there. This operation creates a new path rather than modifying the one you have selected, so I typically do a cut operation to temporarily put my new path on the clipboard so that I can delete the old one, then paste my new one back in place with Illustrator's paste in front command. Here's what it looks like before expanding the path and after. It's very subtle, but it helps make the thin strokes buried in a sea of black look how they're supposed to look. And one last note about this operation is that it's something you'll want to do after sizing your artwork to the size you plan on cutting it, not before. Otherwise, the 0.05 inch measurement, or whatever you use, for offset will be way too big or way too small, since it's a relative offset based on your artwork's current size. I had scaled my logo to 2.5 inches, which I determined was a good size for a circular patch on a trucker hat, so my offset was relative to that. So with all that nitty-gritty technical detail out of the way, it was time to start the lasering. I got started with the white leather, as that was the one I was most eager to work with. This leather had a slightly matte finish to it, so I didn't know if that meant it would clean up easily after lasering when removing the smoke and burned leather residue or not, but I decided to mask it off just in case with some painter's tape. I also bumped up the resolution since I was etching some small details and then let the laser get to work. Lasering leather is pretty straightforward, but a word of warning to all who attempt this. Real leather is quite literally cowhide. Have you ever scorched your knuckle hair while messing with fireworks or toasting marshmallows over an open campfire? If so, you're familiar with the putrid smell that is burnt hair. Well, bad news. Hair and skin are both made up of very similar proteins, such as keratin, meaning laser etching leather smells like burnt hair. If you're going to take a stab at a project like this, you'll want really good exhaust, and even with really good exhaust, apparently the smell lingers. While I was working, a guy I know at the makerspace came and told me that the parking lot that the laser room's exhaust vents to smelled like burnt hair. Whoops. After the laser got done, I could inspect its work. The painter's tape came off the white leather quite easily, but there were a ton of small details that would have been a pain to try to pick out by hand. Did I mention I hate weeding? Luckily, someone in the comments of my last video gave me a suggestion to make quicker work of this. Use more tape as sort of a wax job for the lingering tape. And boy howdy, did this work like a charm. I had to use a lot of tape to do this, as the adhesive quickly got dirty with the residue from the laser, but it worked great. To make it easier on myself, I taped a piece of painter's tape adhesive side up to hold the patch in place while I did the wax job with the rest of the tape. Afterwards, I took it over to the air compressor to blow out any fine leather dust that may have gotten embedded in the surface. There were a few parts where there was some smoke residue that had went underneath the tape, but a paper towel dabbed with a little rubbing alcohol had this come right off. And I loved how this one turned out. I had wanted a white leather patch for my hat since I thought the logo would be more readable this way, and it totally was. But I still wanted to do a more traditional leather patch in brown leather too, so I tried that next. Now this leather was quite a bit different. For one, it wasn't as stiff. It was the same thickness, but it was more floppy for lack of a better word. It also didn't have the same sheen to it that the other leather did. This left me torn as to whether or not I should mask it or not with painter's tape, since the surface was more fibrous, kinda like the inside of a sweatshirt. For one, I didn't want the laser to get a ton of char or residue on the leather, but I also suspected that the tape would be really hard to remove from this, especially in the fine details. These fears were for the most part not realized. It took maybe a little more tape and a little more effort, but the tape did come off. Instead, one of the issues I discovered with this different leather had more to do with my logo than anything. Using the solid filled version of my logo and etching away such a large amount of the suede leather really took away from the charm of this kind of leather and kind of made the logo hard to read. So for my second attempt, I decided to use the non-filled version of my logo where the details were reversed. Since the details were being etched here rather than being etched around, I decided to forego the masking tape altogether. This worked just fine in the main portion of the logo, as any residue came off just fine with a few dabs of the tape after the fact. But the intense energy of the cutout pass left some dark burns and residue around the perimeter of the patch that no amount of tape dabbing seemed to remove. So for my next and thankfully last attempt at this patch, I left the design unmasked for the etching, but then put some tape down on the design before doing the cutout pass. I also decided to do the cutout in a few faster and less powerful passes rather than in a single high-power pass. This protected the edges from getting overly scorched and worked quite nicely. It just needed a little bit of tape cleanup to get some of the burned residue off the surface. With both of my patches made, I could get them adhered to the hats. Now I'm not sure what the bigwigs in the custom trucker hat industry use, but after a little research, I decided to use a clear E6000 adhesive. It's an all-around good, all-purpose adhesive that can be used on fabrics, and when it's fully cured, it's still somewhat flexible, meaning it wouldn't cause the hat to be overly stiff or rigid around the patch, allowing it to still follow the curvature of the hat. I started by applying a heavy layer of E6000 onto the back side of the leather patch. I then took a scrap piece of wood and spread the adhesive evenly all over the back to fully saturate it. Wearing rubber gloves, I carefully lifted the now very sticky patch off of my lined work surface and applied it to the hat. Thankfully, even center placement by eye was pretty easy with my patch for a few reasons. For one, the hat had a seam directly down the middle of the front panel, telling me where the center of the hat was, and my logo has the tree and laser beam imagery centered horizontally on the logo. So by simply lining these two up by eye, that patch ended up perfectly centered on the hat. After the patch was positioned, I took a few pieces of painter's tape to hold it in place and then got a little creative with clamping. I decided to place the hat's patch side down on the edge of my table with a heavy quart mason jar of home canned chicken stock placed inside to hold the surface of the hat flat with the patch as the adhesive cured. Sometimes you gotta get a little creative, right? I left these to cure for a full day before inspecting. It turned out that I didn't get enough adhesive in a few of the areas, as you can see by me peeling the patch up here. I want to put a little bit more adhesive under the patch in these areas, but I didn't trust myself to not get it all over the hat too, so I put down a good amount of painter's tape around the patch while I did so. Since some of the adhesive would inevitably get on the tape in this process, I made sure to remove the tape before letting the new adhesive dry, so that it didn't bond to the tape too, resulting in tiny bits of torn blue painter's tape that I'd have to contend with later. After another day with the chicken stock clamps, my new hats were ready for prime time. So, there you have it. Now I'm absolutely thrilled with how these turned out, and I can't wait to wear them in future videos. You may have caught me wearing one like this in my previous video, but that was an early prototype where I later determined that the leather patch was too big. 2.5 inches is definitely the perfect size for this kind of thing. Now to be real with you, I did get a little bit of adhesive above the patch on the black hat, which isn't super noticeable unless you're looking for it. But considering I'll be wearing these in the shop and sawdust flying around, it's going to get dirty pretty quick, so it won't be nearly as noticeable as it is right now on a pristine, perfectly new hat. If you're interested in making your own leather patch for a trucker hat, tool bag, backpack, etc., I've included links down below for the 2 swatches of leather that I bought, as well as other supplies I used in this build. So I'm all ready for WorkbenchCon 2020 with my Fake It Till You Make It trucker hat. If you're going to be there, let me know down in the comments so we can meet up and say hi. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, cheers.